Welcome to Lesson 7. This is the first lesson of 3 about insurance. We will cover property and casualty in this lesson. Now, for many people, insurance and risk management really is not their favorite topic in the financial world. It's not fun to think about things like your home burning down or being damaged by a flood. For many people, the topic of their death is not something they want to discuss, understandably so. I really doubt anyone would enjoy thinking about losing their job due to a physical or mental ailment. In fact, you may feel depressed even hearing this slide. But what I want you to walk away with is when you handle and understand risks like these appropriately, you may actually have a feeling of security and relief. So let's talk about what risks are. What are risks? Any type of potential identifiable loss is a risk. A loss could be something like, a loss of life. That's an example of a risk. Another risk is losing a property or an asset due to theft, loss, damage, or even just misplacement. This is in contrast to losing the use of an asset due to flood, fire, earthquake, hurricane, or any sort of natural disaster that can occur to your property. Lastly, another example of risk is the loss of your means to grow more assets or basically financially support yourself. The most obvious example of this would be like a disability. So, many people do not give enough thought to risks. Like we talked about a second ago, this is just not an enjoyable topic. Many people focus on either today's lifestyle or saving for tomorrow, building up your retirement assets, building up a nest egg. If given $1,000 a month to dedicate towards your financial goals, many people would simply just use it to accumulate or grow their money. However, this is not looking at the entire picture. For your sports fans out there, this would be as short-sighted as completely ignoring your defensive strategies and only working on offense. In American football, it would be laughable if the team didn't send their defensive line out when they didn't have possession of the ball. Imagine a baseball team that only sent out a pitcher, but no infielders or outfielders onto the field when they weren't batting. Just doesn't make sense, right? Bringing this back to personal finance, it may be equally detrimental to not build a defense strategy. If you were to suffer a loss, it may be financially catastrophic without insurance. For example, imagine your house burning down without any homeowner's insurance. As we talked about in the previous lesson, you should have an emergency fund to help you get through a rough patch. However, if you're disabled while in the peak earning portion of your career, your emergency funds may not help you beyond a year. Lastly, in a household where there are dependents such as a partner, spouse, or children, the loss of life may have dire consequences. It's a common misconception that in a sole breadwinner relationship where there are children, life insurance may not be necessary for the non-working spouse. However, if you think about it, household, childcare, just basic maintenance that the non-working spouse may do certainly has an economical value to them. So, how do we handle risks? There's really 4 methods to handling risk. And whether you realize it or not, you are using one of these methods to handle each and every risk that you face. Think about it. The first option is retention. This means that you are accepting the risk and its associated consequences. This may be acceptable for many risks, but you should do that knowingly. Examples of risks that you may retain are things like speeding while driving, the deductible on your homeowner's insurance or any sort of insurance policies, or something unlikely and not insurable like, an alien invasion. The next option is to reduce your risk. This means that you take action to reduce the potential of your loss. An example of this is trying your best to not get any door dings on your car. When you're parking your car, you may elect to park your car in a spot next to a wall or kind of away from other cars. This would help reduce that some joker who parked beside you would open his door very hard and inflict a small amount of damage on your car. That's basically how you reduce your risk there. Another example, or method rather, of handling risk is to avoid the risk altogether. This means you take action to specifically avoid the risk. For example, if you're fearful of death from a skydiving accident, you probably wouldn't sign up for recreational skydiving. Thus, you would avoid that risk. Lastly, the item or the method we will focus on the most is transferring your risk or sharing that risk with another party. This is exactly what insurance does. An example of this is paying a certain amount, known as a premium, in order for an insurance company to absorb the potential loss, let's say of your house or your income, things like that. So on this chart here, this is basically a quick reference guide on how each risk management technique can be used. You may be able to form an argument to use a different method, but this is basically a guideline. For instance, I would say that you should try to I would say you should try to reduce risks that have a high frequency but low severity. However, if that severity is very low, you may just choose to retain them altogether. In general, insurable risks are ones that have a low and somewhat predictable frequency but a very high severity. This is because an insurance company is able to estimate a fairly reasonable amount of loss for a given number of customers within a specific time. By contrast, an insurance company would not find it profitable to insure against something that has a high frequency and a high severity. Hopefully that makes sense. Now let's talk about liability. If your actions or direct inaction cause harm to others, you are liable. In modern times, this means you are now financially responsible for damage or loss someone else is experiencing. If you are a homeowner, this could be because your pet attacked another person. You hear about dog bites and insurance policies all the time. If you drive a car, you could be found liable in a car accident. If you provide medical, legal, financial, or any kind of professional advice for a living, you may be liable for bad advice or advice that's not comprehensive enough. Since most liability situations have a low frequency but potentially high severity, we might consider transferring the risk associated with these to an insurance company. This could take the form of an insurance policy for homeowners, auto insurance. Professional people have things like errors and omissions insurance, malpractice insurance, business liability insurance, just to name a few.